Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Easy Coaching Academy. This is the classroom, day one. We're going to kick things off with talking about what's on the hot list for everybody, phone etiquettes. This is your Honorable Prof.ZAK, and I'm going to talk about the pros and cons and the do's and don'ts of phone etiquettes. And that's how we're going to kick things off. We're going to make this a regular thing, and this is Thursday evening. And I'm just going to make this a regular thing. So, all my students out there, brace yourselves. If unfortunately by circumstance you can't come to the classroom, I've decided to bring the classroom to you. So, phone etiquettes, as we know, is a very important element of customer services. And what's the first thing that comes to, there are some key things that come to mind when we talk about providing stellar customer services by phone. And I'm going to discuss some of those real quick. Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is when the phone rings. It's not just the greeting, but even before the greeting is something very important, and that's answering the phone right away. Now, when I was an administrative supervisor with a traditional telephone answering service providing company, one of the things that we used to train our team on used to be that it's really, really essential and key to answer the phone as soon as possible. So within, if not possible on the first ring, but within the first, 3 rings. So you want to answer it right away so as to not make the customer on the other end wait for a very long time for their call to get answered, because that can make the customer really antsy. And as soon as you pick up the phone, you want to really introduce yourself with an enthusiastic greeting and announce your identity. So, for example, I would say something like, "Hi, thanks for calling the Easy Coaching Academy. This is Prof.ZAK. How can I help you?" Something which not only tells them who they're talking to, but also embraces them with a warm greeting, so that they feel welcome, even though they're not there physically, they're there virtually. And I emphasize on this word because this day the environment that prevails leads us in that direction. That the virtual customer services environment has to be conducive to really, really beyond, augmented customer services, beyond the customer's expectation. And for that, you have to be, the first things first, the greeting has to be enthusiastic. The introduction has to be top notch. It has to be there. They should know who they're speaking with. Once that's established and they know who they're talking to, you move on. And I've already told you that the greeting has to be enthusiastic. There has to be energy in your tone, and it has to be a friendly tone. It can't be morose. It can't be curt. It can't be abrasive. It just can't be unwelcoming. Smile, and we used to really recommend this to people training with us, because even though they can't see you, believe it or not, they can hear the smile even though they're miles away or on the other end of a virtual digital environment. So keep this in mind, that your attitude will determine the customer's altitude, because it's not just about customer services. We used to say this phrase, it's about customer experience. So a positive attitude that they can hear on the phone, which is audible enough and comes through, is fundamental, to delivering a positive outcome to ensure that the call goes well. And that's what this is all about. You want to ensure that the customer has a good experience by phone. Once that's established, you have to really pay attention to the reason for the call. So your listening has to be really sharp and attentive. It doesn't make sense for you to make the customer repeat themselves more than once once they've stated the reason for why they're calling. If you're the kind of person that has poor retention skills, it might help. It doesn't harm you to keep a notepad or a word pad or even something which you can handwrite the customer's notes with, so that it helps you retain what the customer said right from the get-go. And this way, you can avoid making the customer repeat themselves over and over. It's always good to keep it to a bare minimum, so just try and ensure that the customer, even if it comes to it, doesn't have to repeat the reason for their call more than one time. But that also just to ensure that you're capturing all the details correctly. If they once they've stated the reason for the call, don't go overboard and try to take the bridle in your own hand. If you're not the right person to offer that help, only offer help if you're the right person to offer the particular help that the customer is seeking. So don't lie or don't exaggerate, and don't try to be the knight or the dame in shining armor if you're not the right person who can really appease the customer with the reason that they're calling or their quandary. Also, when you're speaking to them, try and avoid dead air as much as possible. That can be very irritable. Do not use slang like dude or say things like sup. Avoid slang. In fact, slang is forbidden when it comes to phone etiquettes, phone customer experience. Also, try and eliminate background noise altogether and any other distractions around you, so that the customer doesn't hear that and it's just you and the customer interacting. So if there's any colleagues that are working around you, try and minimize the noise that seeps through the other end to the customer. And this way, that you can keep your focus on the customer exclusively, and that's very helpful. Also, once the customer stated the reason for the call, you've done your accurate note taking, you've avoided the dead air, you haven't used any inappropriate fillers, you haven't used any slang, you haven't been short or curt, you've captured the reason for the call, and you've assured them that you're going to transfer the call or forward the call to the appropriate person so that they can call them back to help them out with whatever they're looking for assistance with. You can just confirm once that everything that you've captured, and you can assure the caller that you're going to either, if you're the person that can directly provide them the help, then assure them that you will. Otherwise, assure them that you'll get them the help that they need. And then, just as important as it is to start the call with a proper greeting, keep in mind that the ending has to be equally appropriate and enthusiastic. You just can't end the call on the fly. I mean, if you've established rapport, and with experience, you'll get good at this. So if you've managed to establish a good rapport with the customer, then you'll realize with experience that the ending has to be as appropriate and enthusiastic as the greeting was. So assure the caller that you're going to help them with everything that they need and confirm that. Now, in case that you need to forward their call, don't just blindly patch them or transfer them to the next station or terminal. You want to be polite with the etiquettes, because this is all about, exceeding the customer's expectations. So you want to ask if the caller will be able to hold. So don't just blindly put them in the virtual world and just patch their call to the next person. But before you do that, mentally prepare them that this is going to happen. That's the best etiquette to follow. So it's always good to ask them, dear sir or ma'am, would you be able to hold, and transfer them only if they say yes. Excuse me. If they're preoccupied with something and they don't have the time to stay on hold for as long as the IVR takes, then do not make the mistake of putting them on hold, because that's just going to especially if it's an irate caller, that's just going to contribute to making their experience worse. And also, before you actually leave them on hold and leave them listening to the dead air or the annoying elevator music that comes on in the IVR forever, confirm the availability of the next person. And then before you actually transfer the call over, it's always a good idea to introduce the caller to the next person. So you want to state their name, the reason for why they've called. One thing I, as a customer myself, especially in the virtual world environment, I find really annoying is that once I've been transferred over to another person, I have to repeat or I have to state again the reason for my call all over from the beginning. That's a peeve with me. I find that really annoying. It's the responsibility of the person that I spoke to at the start of the call to make sure that they state all that to the next person that they're transferring me to. If it so happens that the person that the customer happens to be looking for is unavailable, make sure you take a detailed message and then politely end the call and make sure that the person that the call is intended for gets the entire details of the message so that they can take appropriate action and then make an informed call back to the customer. This is what stellar customer experience is all about. I mean, this is typically what you would do even in a face-to-face customer environment, customer services experience environment. So please ensure that these notes are followed to a key because this is really important. A good question to ask right now would be, what should one do when the person on the other end is a really irate caller? It so happens every now and then, every once in a while, that the person calling might be somebody that's reached the end of their tether, but it's not. Just keep in mind that they've not lost their fuse with you personally. It's probably the administrative policies of the company. It's an experience that they had that they're bitter with or bitter about. So you, the person on the phone, don't take whatever they're saying or shouting about or expressing disgruntlement about personally. It's always best to acknowledge their concern and show empathy when you do it. And by the way, I always teach this, that there's a very thin line between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is when you just plain feel sorry for somebody, like a homeless person, for example. And empathy would be when you put yourself in the other person's shoes. So if somebody had a bad experience with a product or service that the company you were answering the phone on behalf of, the customer happened to experience that, just show empathy and put yourself in their shoes and imagine how you would feel if you were them. So not just acknowledge their concern, but actually show empathy by putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And also, you don't want the call to stumble out of control. So you must, maintain control of the call at all times. So if the customer happens to just start to ramble on and on and on and on, it's always best to allow them to do that a little bit to blow off some steam. But then you want to regain the control of the call by interjecting politely and just excusing yourself and saying, dear sir or ma'am, or let's say, for example, Stacy, I just wanted to say that the really exorbitant bill you received, and I feel that, so you were disgruntled about that in the beginning, for example, or whatever the reason may be, just politely interject, very politely. Don't get short with them, and don't if they happen to curse or use swear language, don't take it personally, and don't lose your patience with them. Just politely interject and bring them to the reason for the call. Bring them to the initial reason for the call once again. And that's what building effective rapport is all about. And keep expressing, sporadic regret whenever it's appropriate and required. And this is, in my opinion, the best way, in a nutshell, to handle an irate caller when you happen to come across one in your day-to-day phone customer experience environment. And that really helps. I've already mentioned this about the call ending. You have to maintain the same enthusiasm as the greeting. You have to maintain the same energy. It always helps if it's around the holidays or if it's a weekend. You wish them with the appropriate salutation. Wish them a good weekend. Wish them a good vacation. Wish them a good good holidays. And once again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Just always smile because they can hear it. Unless, of course, they're sharing some bad news or some sad news with you. Of course, you don't want to smile at that juncture because then that would be highly inappropriate, and that would just add to their fury. You don't want to do that. But otherwise, just smile. They can hear it. So once again, let me recap today's quick lecture about phone etiquettes, and I like to call this lecture Phone Etiquette 101. When you answer the call in the greeting, you want to identify yourself and the organization immediately. You want to take a detailed message, take notes if it helps. Never leave someone on hold forever. Always seek permission before you do put them on hold. Never let there be dead air. Always use positive filler words like absolutely, surely, definitely, certainly, for example, but never things like that. Never swear or never use slang. Make sure the ending is as appropriate and as enthusiastic as your greeting was. And of course, just to cap it all up, always make sure that the phone gets answered in the first or second ring, ideally, but no more than three rings. If it happens to be really busy and there's a Skype at your workstation. So, in a nutshell, this is all the things that I could think of to present today at the top of my head. Of course, if there's more things that you want to learn about, you can email us at EEZEE and the word coaching all at once. That's EEZEE coaching at gmail.com. This is your friend and host, Prof.ZAK, signing off with a lecture on phone etiquettes.